Cha! We are back with Hour 2 of the Marc Patrone radio program, so very glad that you could join us. As the surge continues for Bernie Sanders, Bernie on the brink, maybe? Sanders' momentum is shaping the final hours of the race as the Iowa caucus now becomes the focus. Bernie forcing his rivals to lower expectations and feeding the Democratic establishment's fear about what a Sanders victory could do. Meantime, I guess in CNBC, of course, is a big warning that the stock market could be spooked if Bernie ends up winning. Miles Christen joins us. He is with Wisconsin International Radio. He joins us from Madison in the great state of Wisconsin. Miles, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So what do you think? Is it Bernie's now to lose, or are there signs that he could be cheated again? I noticed that Trump himself said they're going to steal it from Bernie again. Did you see his latest tweet?
No, I didn't see the latest tweet, but I definitely could see them stealing it from Bernie if Bernie actually were to win the primary. I mean, there's many primaries and caucuses, and even if he got the majority of it, they could steal it very simply by, one part is the whole superdelegate system. The Democrats had this kind of weird double speak of saying they were going to get rid of the superdelegates, but then they ended up in a court case where they said, well, basically we don't have to get rid of the superdelegates because we're a private organization. I really, really doubt Bernie's going to get the primary or the nomination. I mean, that is, but it is a possibility, but a very, very small possibility, I'd say.
This was Trump's tweet a couple of hours ago. The DNC on Bernie Sanders, quote, looks like they're going to do it to him again, doesn't it? Unquote. So there you go. He's getting the crowds. So, he's huge numbers wherever he goes. And so this is all despite the fact that the establishment, the party establishment, is dead set against having this guy. It's almost like Trump, back in 2015, right? Where the Republican establishment said, we got to stop this guy. And yet there was no way to stop him once he started steamrolling. And then slowly but surely, the Ted Cruzes of the world and others just kind of fell by the wayside and then got in line and said, okay, well, this is going to be the guy, like it or not. But in this case, it seems like the Democrat Party is, well, let's just say they're not above doing everything they can, including underhanded means to try and prevent Bernie from being the Democrat Party representative candidate.
Well, I think they would. I really think when you get in those higher echelons of the Democratic Party, they would probably take 4 more years of Trump over Bernie because, one of the biggest things I saw during the Obama years and the lead up to the Obama years was all the big corporate crony money shifting away from, plenty of it stayed with the Republicans, but a lot of the big corporate crony money, especially the tech money, joining with the Democrats, realizing, well, they could just buy off the Democrats completely. And if Bernie were to win, I think Bernie still has his cronyism when it comes to things like parts of the military-industrial complex that most people don't even acknowledge. But I don't know. It's they don't want Bernie to be the guy,
Well, Bloomberg is continuing to surge from what I hear. This is, I know it's certainly not your favorite candidate, but all the spending of all that money, I guess, is starting to make some inroads. Could this be sort of the Democrat Party's compromise choice? It's like, well, if we have to have somebody kind of on the outskirts of the party, we'd rather have Bloomberg than Bernie Sanders.
At this point, anybody who's still in the race could theoretically win it, except for, of course, Tulsi, because she's probably got even less of a chance than Bernie. But the big question I keep thinking is who's going to be the vice presidential candidate. Maybe they'll go with Buttigieg and Bloomberg. I don't know. I told somebody just the other day about stop and frisk, and they didn't know the connection between Bloomberg and stop and frisk. And it's like, just how do people not remember that he was the Republican mayor who supported George W. Bush's re-election, you know?
Well, presumably all this stuff should be coming out now as his detractors, the people who don't want him to be the guy say, well, don't you remember all the nasty stuff he did, what he represented, who he was, you know, what a little tyrant he was in New York? You know, presumably those who don't want Bloomberg around would be raising this stuff.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I heard Bloomberg had donated a lot of money to the Democratic Party right before he entered the race, and that's the thing. I mean, he's bought his way in. I mean, it's weird how with mayors, I think I've talked about this before, where mayors, they either chose to let them really, you know, into the race. And I mean, you had de Blasio and you had Buttigieg, and then there was another mayor out of Florida who actually was like a national college athlete. And he's a mayor of an even bigger town than South Bend, Indiana. And they didn't even mention him for a moment. It's like, well, why did they mention Buttigieg but not the mayor out of Florida? And it's like his name, I can't remember how to pronounce it. It's like Misium or something like that. But he was a mayor of I think something like Tallahassee, Florida, or something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Meantime, I guess Trump rolling along. It looks like the impeachment stuff is going to collapse finally in a heap this week, right? There's going to be acquittal. Are we looking at Wednesday maybe, or could it be sooner?
It's probably going to be, you know, within this week or so, and it's.
Then what?
You know,
then what? I mean, do the Democrats find something else to complain about? Or it's just like they're like a kid in a Toys R Us store, you know, screaming, jumping up and down, holding their breath, demanding to get what they want, and they never do. And
well, they'll probably come up with like the next country that's like they went Russia, then they went Ukraine. They have to, you know, they're picking these countries to try to associate Trump with, which, you know, if he has if his connections to those countries are corrupt or not, I'm not sure. But they're kind of picking particular countries where, I don't know, they have to, basically the bad guy's got to be a certain almost like post-Cold War mentality in some way. Like, they wouldn't go picking on an Asian country or an African country. You know, it's got to be very particular countries to be associated with Trump somehow that just fit this weird paranoia, you know?
Meantime, Biden, he's more and more of an embarrassment, right? I mean, he's been crying lately on the campaign trail, saying that, no, it should have been Beau Biden running for president. Forgetting what year he did what. It's just, and yet there are still Democrats who say, no, Biden is going to be the guy. And so, but he could face corruption charges himself. I mean, between what happened with him and Hunter, I guess that's still kind of a cloud, and that is something that could actually be investigated in Congress. Is that correct?
Anything could be investigated in Congress with the Republicans in control. I mean, it seems like the Republicans actually care about investigating stuff that actually happened, whereas the Democrats want to investigate fictitious things that happened.
Well, I mean, the more they go down that rabbit hole, then, of course, you're starting to implicate Obama, and that's like he's a saint, right, in the Democrat Party. You can't say anything. But apparently Michelle, no, it wasn't Michelle. It was, although it could have been, who was it, Jay-Z and Beyonce. Beyonce did not stand for the national anthem yesterday at the start of the Super Bowl. But I guess
I am not familiar with it. I was actually working all day yesterday, so I did not see the Super Bowl.
Well, you didn't miss. Well, you know what? Are you a football fan?
I'm a political nerd. That's where all my time goes. And
we appreciate that, because without you, I mean, heck, we wouldn't be getting nearly the type of insights that we've been getting, especially on the machinations of the Democrat Party race, impeachment, and the upcoming election. Have you heard anything about Trump's popularity? I mean, is it looking more and more like he could win again. I think I've asked you this before, Wisconsin, Michigan, some of those states. Apparently, there was a story that came out of Illinois that suggested that hundreds of thousands of illegals may have very well have sort of shifted the balance in favor of the Democrats in Illinois. If you recall, they only won by a microscopic percentage last time, 2016.
You know, the whole entire process in the United States of our voting, and I mean, especially, there were serious issues with Florida in 2000, and in 2004 you also had issues with Ohio and the electronic voting machines and who owns the voting machines. I mean, I think there's no greater classic example of voting in America than Nixon versus Kennedy of 1960, because you had voter tampering on both sides, the Democrats and Republicans. I think there could be illegals voting, but I don't think that's much of a serious issue. I think, voter tampering could be done electronically by either party. I mean, Chicago is famous for their messing with the votes and so forth. And it's funny is when, like situations like 2000 or 2004, it tends to be the third parties, like the Green Party, that actually want to do recounts. And in the case of the 2016 election, they did a recount in Wisconsin. They actually found more votes for Trump.
Really? Isn't that something? Because usually they seem to find a mystery bag of votes for the Democrat Party. You often hear that in certain counties in Florida, for example.
Well,
I think
in
it's
Wisconsin,
Broward.
we had a famous case. It must have been 2014, or even no, it was actually maybe 2011, where the Democrat judge won by 251 votes, and then the next day they found like a ripped bag with like 1,500 votes or 2,000 votes or something for the Republican judge. And Wisconsin's just it's very, some of the voting in Wisconsin gets very strange. Like in 2016, third party candidates did pretty good. I mean, they got over like 100,000 votes, which is pretty impressive. And then in the 2018 election, it went down to something like less than a fourth of that. And I really have to wonder if some third party votes didn't get counted in the 2018 election. But will Trump win the state of Wisconsin? I have no reason to doubt that he will, because even they're going to put a lot of money in this state. They're going to have the convention here in this state, but it's just the Democratic Party of Wisconsin is so. I mean, there's no other way to say it, but dumb. They don't understand the people here. They had this big congressional race a couple years ago where they were running this guy, this iron worker, against Paul Ryan, and then Paul Ryan dropped out or whatever. But they still ran this iron worker here in the state of Wisconsin, and it was like, whoa, this guy's running for the biggest congressional seat, and yet he had a history of drunk driving and all sorts of delinquent payments for his child support and so forth. And they just run really, really bad candidates in Wisconsin. In fact, they run the same exact candidates for the exact same offices again and again and again. And Wisconsin Democratic Party, I mean, they just have no idea what they're doing.
Which is good for the GOP. Miles, thank you so much. Really appreciate this as always.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Miles Kristen, check out Wisconsin International Radio on the web. That's an awesome little site, and we'll have more news talk after this.
Stream us live at saga960am.ca.